5-on-1 in the prison yard. He didn't back down, he charged. Hostage situations, rooftop standoffs, threats so wild, even guards quit. You're not watching a movie. You're about to meet the man the British prison system still can't figure out how to contain. The brawler from Luton. Charles Bronson wasn't born a monster. He was born Michael Gordon Peterson in 1952 in Luton, England. Quiet town. Working class family, nothing fancy. His dad ran a conservative club. His aunt, Eileen Perry, was once the mayoress of Luton. He didn't exactly follow in her footsteps. By age 13, he was already in fights. Teachers said he was trouble with a capital T. His parents tried moving him to Cheshire for a fresh start. Didn't help. He fought local kids, teachers, authority, and anyone with a face. By 19, he had a job at Tesco, got fired for attacking his manager, worked as a bare-knuckle boxer for cash under the name Mick. Then came the real gig, crime. In 1974, he walked into a post office with a sawed-off shotgun and robbed it. Got just £26.18. Not the heist of the century. Police caught him hours later. He was sentenced to 7 years at Walton jail in Liverpool. That's when the real story began. From day one inside, he wasn't like the other inmates. Most guys wanted to keep their heads down. Bronson, he wanted to fight. Didn't matter if it was guards, prisoners, or walls. If it moved, he punched it. If it didn't, he still might punch it just to check. Within weeks, he was put in solitary for attacking 2 inmates over bread. He later said prison didn't scare him, but excited him. He called it his playground. Walton's staff started transferring him between prisons to deal with the violence. That just gave him new people to hit. By the end of his first year inside, Bronson had picked up more charges. He'd gone from small-time robber to full-time menace. The guards had a nickname for him, the Zombie. Not because he was slow, because he didn't stop. 7 years? That was the plan. But Bronson had other ideas. He would spend almost the rest of his life in prison, and most of it alone. And that £26? Still the most expensive mail run in British history. First sentence, first war. Bronson's first stop after sentencing was Walton jail. That didn't last. After headbutting a guard and smashing up the canteen over a cold meal, he was quickly transferred. Then again, and again. In just 2 years, he moved through more prisons than most inmates see in a lifetime. Hull, Armley, Risley, and more. Each time, the staff had the same complaint: too violent to manage. In Hull, he attacked a fellow inmate for snoring. In Risley, he beat a man unconscious for looking at him funny. He didn't throw punches, he lived in them. He didn't need a reason, just space and a face. One guard wrote in a report, "Peterson has no interest in rehabilitation, he seeks only confrontation." No kidding. By 1976, just 2 years into his 7-year sentence, Bronson had already earned extra time, a lot of it. He was now serving a total of 15 years. Not because he escaped, but because he stayed and made it worse. At one point in 1978, he barricaded himself inside his cell with makeshift weapons, a broken broom handle, a chair leg, and a belt. He told guards if they came in, they'd go out missing teeth. They waited. He eventually gave up, but not before trashing the place and writing "King of the Jungle" on the wall in soap. In 1982, he got moved to Parkhurst, one of the UK's most high-security prisons. It was meant for murderers and terrorists. Bronson fit right in, minus the politics. He was still technically a robber, but by now, everyone called him a fighter first, criminal second. His original release date should have been 1981. Instead, he was just getting warmed up. The British prison system had officially lost control, and Bronson knew it. Becoming Charles Bronson. By the early 80s, Michael Peterson had built a reputation inside. Violent, unpredictable, impossible to house. But something shifted in 1982. He decided to rebrand himself, not with good behavior, with a new name, Charles Bronson. Inspired by the mustached American action star, the name gave him the perfect cover story. He wasn't just an inmate anymore, he was a character. The legal name change became official. Prison logs started listing him as Bronson C., and he acted like it. He shaved his head, bulked up to 210 pounds of pure muscle, and started speaking like a man on a movie set, one that only had one scene: prison brawl. Bronson spent most of this period in solitary, not as punishment, more like self-defense. Other prisoners didn't want to share space with him, neither did staff. At Wandsworth, he reportedly flipped a prison bed with an inmate still on it. At Parkhurst, he assaulted a guard during a routine search, then blamed a moment of artistic frustration. He filled the hours by training obsessively: push-ups, squats, shadowboxing. No equipment, just rage and floor tiles. His fists got faster. So did his reputation. By 1985, Bronson was no longer just a violent prisoner. He was a known risk across the entire UK system. They started moving him to psychiatric units, hoping he'd mellow out. Instead, he attacked a doctor who asked about his childhood. "Don't need therapy," he said. "Need space." During one transfer to Broadmoor Hospital, he trashed a room in under 15 minutes, ripped a sink out of the wall, bent the steel bed frame. When guards entered, he calmly sat on the floor eating a banana. "Got bored," he explained. This wasn't mindless violence. It was branding. The Bronson myth grew with every outburst. Staff whispered stories. Inmates refused to cross him. Even tabloids started catching on. Britain's most dangerous prisoner made headlines, and Bronson loved it. He wasn't trying to get out anymore. He was building a kingdom inside. One where fear was currency, and he always had the biggest pile. Rooftop rage and national headlines. In 1987, Charles Bronson decided prison walls weren't enough. So he went up, literally. That year, he scaled the roof of Broadmoor Hospital and started one of the most infamous standoffs in British prison history. For 2 full days, he paced across the tiles, tore off roof panels, and shouted demands at guards below. His message? "I run this place now." The damage cost over £250,000. Broadmoor had to evacuate patients. Riot teams were prepped. He eventually climbed down. But the message stuck. If Bronson was bored, someone was going to pay for it. And he kept climbing. In 1990, he pulled the same stunt at Hull Prison, up the drainpipe, onto the roof, and back into the headlines. This time, he smashed water tanks and threw tiles at guards like they were pigeons. He was up there for hours, screaming that the food was garbage and the system was worse. When they asked what he wanted, he said, "A helicopter and a cheeseburger." Each rooftop protest made the evening news. The media ate it up. So did Bronson. He clipped headlines from newspapers and kept them in his cell like trophies. One staff member wrote, "He doesn't want freedom, he wants an audience." But it wasn't just climbing. In between protests, Bronson kept up his usual hobbies: fighting, threatening guards, and wrecking property. He destroyed prison TVs, flooded his own cell. Once, he even bit into a glass just to prove he could. He was moved 120 times between 1987 and 1994. No prison could hold him for long, and not just because of damage. Bronson made staff nervous. He'd smile while planning chaos. In 1992, he got into a brawl with 2 guards. One ended up with a broken nose. Bronson told investigators, "He got in the way of my breakfast." In 1993, he threw a table through a reinforced window, just to see if it would break. It did. By 1994, Bronson wasn't just feared, he was a known liability. One guard called him a hurricane in human form. But the worst was still to come. Hostage taker for hire. In 1994, Charles Bronson crossed a new line. He stopped breaking things and started taking people. His first known hostage was a prison librarian named Kenneth Oliver. Bronson locked the man in a room for nearly 2 days. He tied him up with torn sheets, painted his face like a clown, and told negotiators he wanted a helicopter, a cup of tea, and an Uzi. In that order, he clarified. No one was hurt physically, but mentally, Oliver never came back to work. Bronson was hit with new charges and tossed into isolation again. He claimed it was all about respect. Said the librarian disrespected him by asking him to return a book. This was the beginning of what prison officials called the hostage era. Bronson would take hostages not out of strategy, but out of frustration or boredom, or some mix of both. It became a pattern. Provoked or not, he'd snap, seize someone, barricade a room, and make demands. In 1996, he struck again at Belmarsh. This time, he held 2 Iraqi hijackers and another inmate hostage for 44 hours. He stripped them naked, tied them up, and marched them around like props. When asked why, he said, "They annoyed me. I'm not a politician." That earned him a life sentence for false imprisonment. But inside, it only grew the legend. Some inmates saw him as a mad king. Others kept their distance. Guards referred to him as a walking riot. Prison governors begged not to have him transferred to their facilities. In 1997, during a rare moment in the general population, he snapped again, this time over a spilled cup of tea. He took a civilian staff member hostage with a broken mop handle. During the standoff, he sang show tunes and did handstands, just to make it weird. By 1998, Bronson had taken at least 9 hostages across multiple prisons. No one died, but everyone came out shaken. Wakefield and the 5-on-1 fight. In 1999, Charles Bronson was moved to HMP Wakefield, a place known as Monster Mansion, for housing the UK's worst offenders. Even there, he stood out. Not for his crime, he was still technically a robber, but for how quickly everything escalated when he showed up. The staff gave him a solitary cell right away. No bunkmate, no shared yard time. just Bronson and 4 concrete walls. But even isolation didn't slow him down. In 2000, during a brief moment in the general yard, Bronson got into it with 5 inmates, all at once. No warning, no words, just fists. Reports say he knocked 2 unconscious, broke one's nose, and left another with cracked ribs. The 5th ran. Smart move. Guards pulled him off while he was still swinging. When they asked why he did it, he said, "They needed waking up. Boring day." That line ended up in his court report. After the fight, he was locked back into solitary indefinitely. Wakefield tried everything to manage him: padded cells, minimal items, constant monitoring. Still, Bronson kept finding ways to cause chaos. He'd flood his cell by blocking the toilet. He'd tear his clothes into ropes and use them to climb furniture. Once, he greased himself head to toe with butter, so guards couldn't grab him during a forced move. He also started sending bizarre letters to journalists and fans. One read, "Solitary's not lonely, it's peaceful. I can hear myself think before I throw the sink." Classic Bronson poetry. Despite the moments of creativity, the violence didn't stop. Wakefield staff said he was calm one second, explosive the next. A psychologist described him as a storm with no forecast. By 2004, Bronson had spent more than 30 years behind bars, with over 25 of those in solitary. No one else had a record like that. But Bronson wasn't done setting records. He was just getting weirder. The art of violence. By the mid-2000s, Charles Bronson had 2 reputations. One as a human battering ram, the other as a prison Picasso. After decades of throwing punches, he started throwing ink. His artwork, detailed, disturbing, and always angry, began winning awards from prison art foundations like the Koestler Trust. That didn't mean he was calming down. It just meant he had something to mail between fights. Bronson's drawings showed screaming faces, bleeding clocks, and padded walls, all hand-drawn in pen or pencil from solitary. Some pieces sold for hundreds of pounds. Others were sent to supporters. He once told a journalist, "Art keeps me from strangling someone every Tuesday." In 2008, his art got national attention when he auctioned off pieces to support children's charities. That confused people. Was this the same guy who once tied up a guard with his own shoelaces? Yep. Same guy. Just with a pen instead of a pipe. But behind the sketchbooks, Bronson was still Bronson. In 2007, he assaulted a fellow prisoner after accusing him of bad hygiene. The man was hospitalized. Bronson said, "I did him a favor. He needed a shower anyway." That year, he also legally changed his name again to Charles Salvador, in honor of artist Salvador Dali. "It's a new me," he claimed. No one believed him. Guards said he was calmer for a while, but it was more like a low growl than actual peace. In 2010, he released a self-help book titled Solitary Fitness, which included no gym equipment, just bodyweight moves and psychological advice like punch walls in your mind. It sold surprisingly well in the UK prison community. Despite the media spin on his artistic transformation, violent incidents didn't vanish. In 2012, he was accused of threatening a governor over denied art privileges. He claimed he was just being passionate. The governor called it terrifying. By 2013, Bronson had built a fan base. Letters poured in from curious civilians and oddball admirers. He signed autographs, responded to fan mail, and made tabloid headlines regularly. But inside, prison officials weren't fooled. His art was real, his charm was real, but the danger? That was still very real, and nobody forgot it. The wedding nobody saw coming. In 2017, Britain collectively raised an eyebrow when headlines screamed, "Charles Bronson gets married," to an actress, in prison, while wearing a Trilby hat. Her name was Paula Williamson, a soap opera actress known for small roles in Coronation Street. They had exchanged letters for years before she finally agreed to visit. A few months later, they were engaged. She said he was misunderstood. He said she was his angel. Most people said, this will not end well. The wedding took place inside HMP Wakefield, with a small ceremony under heavy security. Bronson wore a suit, a tie, and that famous Trilby. Williamson wore a white dress and a nervous smile. Guests included prison officers and a few family members. No one was allowed to kiss. The vows had to be recited from opposite ends of a table. Bronson later called it the best day of my life. Williamson told tabloids she believed he could change. The media ate it up, so did Bronson. He posed for photos, gave interviews, and referred to himself as a reformed husband. Behind the scenes, staff watched closely, waiting for the punchline. It came not long after. In 2017, Williamson was spotted partying with other men, including one who licked her face on camera. The photos hit the press. Bronson snapped. From his cell, he filed for divorce. He claimed betrayal. She claimed she was humiliated. The fairy tale ended with lawyers, tabloids, and more bad headlines. In classic Bronson style, he didn't mourn quietly. He sent angry letters to the press and challenged the man in the photo to a boxing match. He also requested a new punching bag for his cell. Therapy, he said. The marriage had lasted less than 3 years. But for Bronson, it wasn't about love, it was theater, it was control. And for a brief moment, he got to play the romantic lead. After the divorce, prison staff noted his mood dipped, just briefly, before he returned to normal. Yelling at walls and drawing cartoons of the justice system, love hadn't changed him. If anything, it reminded everyone that underneath the suit, Charles Bronson was still a storm waiting for someone to step too close. Parole, paperwork, and denials. By 2018, Charles Bronson had spent over 4 decades behind bars, with nearly all of it in solitary. Still, he insisted he was reformed. He wasn't the raging animal anymore. He said he was an artist, a philosopher, and ready to rejoin society. The parole board wasn't buying it. That year, he applied for release. He wrote letters, submitted artwork, even offered to live in a remote cottage to avoid temptations. The hearing dragged on for months. His criminal record was 1,200 pages long. Judges called him intelligent but manipulative. One parole officer reportedly described him as a bomb with a paintbrush. Denied. In 2019, he tried again. This time, he argued his last violent incident was years ago. He claimed to be Britain's most peaceful prisoner. Odd, considering he had recently headbutted a cell door off its hinges. His request was rejected again, too unstable. Meanwhile, Bronson kept the headlines alive. He gave recorded audio messages to supporters, some leaked online. In one, he said, "I've been banged up for nearly 45 years. If I were a dog, they would have put me down." Not inaccurate. By 2020, he'd become a strange sort of celebrity. His face was printed on t-shirts. A documentary aired on Channel 4 titled Bronson, Fit to be Free? The conclusion? Probably not. In 2021, his legal team launched a new campaign arguing that continued solitary confinement was a breach of human rights. Bronson backed it with drawings of himself behind bars labeled caged but calm. Public support grew. Celebrities spoke out. Still, no release. Finally, in 2023, he got what he wanted, a full public parole hearing. Britain watched as the man once called the most violent prisoner in the UK pleaded for freedom. He cracked jokes, quoted poetry, and claimed he hadn't been violent in a decade. The board was not amused. He was denied again. The ruling said he remained a risk to the public. Bronson called the panel a bunch of cowards. He went back to his cell, requested more drawing supplies, and started sketching the parole board as clowns. Reformed or not, the system wasn't ready to test it. And Bronson wasn't done making noise. Still caged in 2025. As of 2025, Charles Bronson, now legally Charles Salvador, is still behind bars. He spent over 50 years in prison, with more than 40 of those in solitary confinement. That's longer than most serial killers. And he didn't even kill anyone, not technically. He currently sits in HMP Woodhill, a high-security facility near Milton Keynes. His cell is basic, a bed bolted to the floor, a desk, and not much else. He still draws. Still works out. Still sends bizarre letters to fans, the media, and politicians. His favorite topic? How much he hates being caged. Despite his age, now 72, Bronson hasn't mellowed much. In 2024, he threatened legal action over the prison's refusal to let him paint in oils. He also refused to eat for a week after being denied a radio. "My ears have rights," he said. He now claims he's 99.9% reformed. That 0.1% though? Everyone's still scared of it. Prison officers remain on alert. New recruits are warned. Do not engage, do not provoke, do not underestimate. Even the prison psychologist reportedly holds sessions through a hatch. In recent interviews, Bronson's tone has changed, but not his grip on power. He calls himself an ambassador for peace, but also says he'll never forgive the system. In one message, he claimed, "The screws fear me more now than they did in '79, and I haven't hit anyone in years." He spends his days drawing, meditating, and doing bodyweight workouts. He's written over a dozen books, mostly about fitness, prison reform, and his own mythology. He still dreams of freedom, but often says the world outside wouldn't recognize him, and he wouldn't recognize it. The British prison system seems stuck. They can't release him, but they can't control him either. He's too famous, too unpredictable, too embedded in UK criminal history, a one-man institution. So he remains in his box, not forgotten, not forgiven, not finished. And every once in a while, he'll send out a sketch or a quote, just to remind everyone he's still in there. Watching, lifting, waiting. Because if prison made Charles Bronson, it never figured out how to unmake him.